Welcome to the film analysis, today with Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay. When the sun shines golden in a light blue sky, when a piano and many strings play a simple theme, when little boys play war in an old aeroplane and shout to each other, "For freedom, for America," all in the first minutes you know you are in for an awful film. Unless, of course, the director was to make an ironic break and say, "I'm not really serious about all this." But we are talking about Michael Bay. He is bitterly serious. Pearl Harbor is supposed to be patriotic cinema, and an audience of millions received the film as such. An audience oblivious to irony. The film from 2001 was supposed to lead the United States into a glorious new century. Therefore, Bay once again invoked the fateful 20th century difficult hours to say, with this new courage, with what we have been through, we may move into the future. The Japanese air raid on the US Pacific Fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor shook the country that thought it was invincible. As a result, America declared war on Japan. The USA subsequently became a decisive party in the Second World War. It is no coincidence that Michael Bay shows American leisure culture in the first hour of this film. A serious, incredibly colorful, a fun society in which training in the Air Force represents above all an adventure. Bay stretches beyond the historical events. The director also shows the society having watched this film in 2001. Only the threat turns the individualistic society into a community again. Hedonism soon turns into heroism. It was precisely this desire for war that led to Afghanistan and Iraq after the happy consumerist 90s. The film promotes this desire. At one point it says, not obsessed with that, but with deed. When Rafe and Danny must donate blood after the Japanese attack, that blood drips into Coca-Cola bottles. The juice of life becomes a refreshing drink for a nation that wants to return to its former glory. At the same time, the war is the backdrop for quite the private story. At the start, there are these two boys who have grown up, whom we've seen after a time jump. Rafe, played by Ben Affleck, and Danny, played by Josh Hartnett. These two young adults sign up for the Air Force. Rafe and Danny seem inseparable. They look out for each other. Rafe is the stronger, the braver one, while Danny is smarter. Rafe is illiterate. And a woman shows up later, Evelyn, played by Kate Beckinsale. Rafe and Evelyn fall in love. Their happiness doesn't last long, with sex being saved for now, interestingly, as Rafe volunteers for the Air Force. Evelyn is not supposed to see him off at the station. The goodbye scene, as befits a melodrama, always at railway stations, takes place, however, between Rafe and Danny. The death note follows suit. Rafe dies in a plane crash. Evelyn and Danny are devastated. As melodrama demands, the two grow closer. Danny replaces the deceased, or rather, that remains to be seen. Evelyn replaces the deceased for Danny, but just in time for the attack on Pearl Harbor, Rafe is suddenly back. He survived the crash after all. A complicated three-way constellation unfolds. Rafe is disappointed in Evelyn and Danny. Danny and Evelyn are happy to have him back, but now unhappy as their love is disturbed. Moreover, Evelyn, soon to be pregnant, disrupts the man's relationship from the very beginning. By no means is this relationship to be interpreted as merely platonic. The film says no homo a few too many times, especially since it spends a lot of verve and a lot of kitsch on establishing and staging the sandbox love as the serious love between two young men. Romantic sincerity is in the dialogue, and a certain mood in the scenes prevails in the men's interactions. When they talk to each other, when they get closer, the film contrasts this with rom-com scenes when Rafe and Evelyn or Danny and Evelyn meet. The comedy underlines this love is not meant to be serious at all. We should understand the plot metaphorically. We could go so far as to say that the Japanese are attacking the USA from behind. Pearl Harbor contains a phobia of anal penetration. We see that, for example, in the scenes in the military hospital when the soldiers receive their shots from the nurses, always in the buttocks, depicted as massive and painful. Later we see a soldier lying there with a sunburn on his bottom, or a Hitler figurine on Roosevelt's desk with Hitler's buttocks bare, needles stuck in there. Danny and Rafe always emphasize we are brothers. And that is supposed to mean, of course, there is no sexual relationship here. They add a much stronger taboo to the homosexuality taboo, the incest taboo, preventing the homosexuality taboo from being broken at all. But what does the attack on Pearl Harbor have to do with all this? War affects us heavily, and now we render it consumable with a little love. Let's ask a simple question. What if Pearl Harbor had never happened? How would this story have gone? We would have an almost unresolvable constellation of three, or it would be a completely different film. How would it have to deal with that? With films based on historical events, we often tend to ask, is everything true? Are all the details correct? Well, historical truths often fall victim to dramaturgical decisions. Also in Pearl Harbor, one can make a long list of everything wrong with the film, but many overlook how war films interpret history is crucial. With a war film, we should always ask ourselves who is erecting a monument to whom, revealing certain intentions. Pearl Harbor presents war as a great integrative moment, integrating a black man, making a career possible. The film aims at it again and again. If we focus on the real past, we are oblivious to the cinematic reality or autonomy of the film. Considering a film by the likes of Titanic, we should calmly ignore the fact that the ship and the sinking really existed. In consequence, the love story seems different, and we also must evaluate the film differently. We realize the ship must sink so that the high society girl can finally get rid of the proletarian. Applying this approach to Pearl Harbor, we must ask, why did the Japanese attack in the first place? The answer, of course, is not a military historical one, not a geopolitical one, if we consider the film as an autonomous work. Corresponding to the question, why do the birds attack in Hitchcock's movie? These birds express something, the incestuous drive, female power, whatever. With Pearl Harbor, it's a little different. The attack carries a concrete function, resolving the conflict between Rafe, Danny and Evelyn. When Rafe returns, there's this startling realization life must go on somehow, you say, and it's always painful to see when life really does go on. And it does. This pragmatism, we all need it to get over things. But in a way, it also always makes you wonder, what was it that I once thought I was feeling so intensely? And that's why everyone is faced with a dilemma. What was this friendship, or perhaps the man's relationship, about? Or what did Evelyn really feel if she is so quick to take comfort in him now? Even if one disregards the interpretation that Rafe and Danny constitute the couple, the ending is stale. The great love becomes a marriage of convenience. Danny must die for this constellation of two to be restored. Rafe and Evelyn are together. Evelyn is pregnant by Danny, but of course Rafe accepts paternity. In any case, it turns out to be an empty delusion here. This geopolitics of love makes the Japanese attack. Love becomes immortal as Danny dies in Rafe's arms during the Japanese counterattack, solving the problem. They share one last moment together. Rafe can now enter a marriage with Evelyn, but love is thus civilly contained. It is no wonder that Rafe and his stepson, the mini Danny, end up flying up to heaven, trying to escape the bourgeois conditions again. The Japanese attack also resolves the conflict that society, or rather mainstream audiences, were not meant to be exposed to. Pearl Harbor also denies homosexual relations. That's why the Japanese, strictly speaking, the conflict does not arise from Rafe's supposed death, but when Evelyn appears. She threatens the relationship between the two men. Let us imagine the French version of this film. There would be no need for Pearl Harbor at all, no need for an attack. The three of them would somehow lead a happy relationship as a threesome, or you could also say that the conflict wouldn't arise in the first place because Rafe and Danny could live their love. And they wouldn't need Evelyn at all. Why war? This question can be discussed very precisely based on Pearl Harbor. We have seen time and again, especially in the last 20 years, war distracts us from internal problems in politics. Pearl Harbor tries something similar, featuring an inner conflict of love. The film shifts it outside and wants to solve it there. Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud also asked themselves the question in the early 1930s, why war? They exchanged letters, and Sigmund Freud talked about psychoanalysis and its relationship to war. Freud said, "We assume that human instincts are of two kinds, those that conserve and unify, which we call erotic, in the meaning Plato gives to Eros in his Symposium, or else sexual, explicitly extending the popular connotation of sex. And secondly, the instincts to destroy and kill, which we assimilate as the aggressive or destructive instincts." End of quote. We witness both instincts in Pearl Harbor, and we know the destructive instinct is much stronger as the film features far fewer love scenes than war scenes or martial battles. Freud goes on to write, if the propensity for war is due to the destructive instinct, we always have its counteragent, Eros, to our hand. All that produces ties of sentiment between man and man must serve us as war's antidote. The psychoanalyst need feel no compunction in mentioning love in this connection. Religion uses the same language. Love thy neighbor as thyself. A pious injunction, easy to announce, but hard to carry out. End of quote. But Michael Bay doesn't intend to carry it out. The slogan, "Make love, not war," is not to be understood naively at all, but as a concrete pacifist response, as Pearl Harbor tells us. And it would be a solution to the problem of Rafe, Danny and Evelyn. But Michael Bay doesn't know love. He only knows destruction. By love, however, we don't watch, but see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.